Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is One Day Today. We are on episode 60 already. Episode 60. Wow. We started this in April. It started as I almost forget that how this all was supposed to begin. It was supposed to be an event in Nashville, and then our world kind of twisted off its axis a little bit. And the world we're experiencing is much different than I think anybody expected. And, for us, and I mean, speaking for just from my perspective, just being in this space where people are sharing their stories, sharing their experiences that have transformed their lives has really opened up so much, and it's really brought some amazing people in our space. Is really sharing just amid pandemic, amid global uncertainty and civil unrest. I really see in just I am so like every day I'm reminded of how powerful humans are, even in the midst of chaos. We have beautiful things that people are creating in the world, and it's encouraging and it's just exciting for what's to come, because among all the things happening in the world, the way I see it, there's never been more opportunities for connection, for community, for collaboration. And it's for me, that's such an exciting prospect of what's possible when we choose to really serve ourselves by serving our neighbors, by seeing and loving and holding a space for the divine expression of the universe and us all. And obviously there's an elephant in the room. There's an election happening. It's uncertain. It seems like it's leading one way, but it might lead another way. And nobody knows what happens or what's going to happen. And, regardless of what happens and who wins or who doesn't win, some people will be excited and some people will be upset, and some people will, there will be a conversation. We have an opportunity to really respond and not react to whatever comes. In this present moment, we have an opportunity to like no matter who wins, we still have the choice in this space right now to choose to be a loving neighbor, to be a good father, to be a good mother, to be a good sibling, to show compassion, to show patience. And regardless of who wins, we have that power at every moment to really to hold that space for community. Because in this ever connected world, we really rise together, and it's like when that's a choice that we make as individuals, and we take responsibility for just the peace in our own hearts and also in our community, and the peace in our communities. It means a better world for us all. When our neighbors are sick, that means with this pandemic, it means we can be sick, but the opposite's also true. When we're happy, when we're healthy, when we're safe, and our neighbors are happy, healthy, and safe, I mean, so are we, and so are our families. And this is the circle of love that we hold together, and this opportunity that we are for a new conversation. But enough about me, enough about my thoughts. Let me first, before I welcome our guests, I want to say hello and welcome our co-host, Matthew. Matthew, how are you doing today, brother?
Doing all right, brother. Feeling a little under the weather. I've been eating like crap for the last 2 weeks, eating out, and I feel like I'm paying for it. But other than that, I'm okay. I was wondering if you were going to bring up the election and like talk about that at all. There is one thing that was present while you were talking about that I'd like to share really quick, and it's something that we like we play with at the farm that I live on part of the year up in Canada, and that is until there's an alternative to this society, to this economic model, to this system, to this world, the reality is most people probably aren't going to know that it's possible to choose different. And I feel like we're seeing that play out. Like we're seeing the futility of arguing on both sides. At least that's what I see. Like that's what I'm watching, and it very much does feel like birthing pains. But like, what are we birthing as a country?
Mm-hmm.
What are we birthing as a world? What are we birthing as a species? And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one day may not be the totality of that, but it could be the beginning of an alternative.
It's I think that's a good point, and that's kind of kind of what I observe. You know, whatever side you're on, this is true for politics, this is true for religion, this is true for any polarizing, you know, school of thought. It's like we dehumanize a perspective or an opinion different than our own. And I think that inherent decision to say, oh, this person doesn't believe what I think, so therefore they are not worthy. They are not, or like they are not able to. It's like we separate them from ourselves and pretend that us ignoring them or us demonizing them won't come back to bite us. And it's like, and that's like, it's the old way. It's like we are all in this boat, and when we can recognize and focus on, you know, the beautiful possibility of each and every one of us, and we can actually take care of the needs of those who don't have their needs met. And it's really when we show up to ourselves, we're able to show up to each other.
Yeah, and on top of that, when we dehumanize or objectify or get angry at another person, what I've found in my own experience is I'm really just angry at that part of myself that I recognize in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it has nothing to do with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
It's all
absolutely.
me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that, like, that awareness that we are everyone, like
Mm-hmm.
the internal mirrors the external,
Mm-hmm.
is something that I love about this space, because this is something we intentionally bring. Like, we bring that mirror every day,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not obviously, maybe sometimes it comes out in really subtle ways, but it's very much what's going on in your external world mirrors what's going on in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can catch that relation and actually start learning from it instead of fighting it, your entire reality will change. And this is just speaking from experience.
It's powerful, profound. I love it. It's very true. All right, well let's invite our first guest. I'm really excited to have her. Let's welcome Ashley Avinashi. Hello,
Thank
Ashley.
you. I'm
Welcome.
grateful to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to have you. I'm just going to let you just hop to it if you're all right with it.
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
Ashley, then the stage is yours.
Yeah, what a beautiful introduction to what's currently moving through our landscape. And I really want to begin by trailing on that. So, we have focused a lot of our energy in helping parents unlearn. And one of the arenas in which we definitely see some dehumanization is in the arena of education, in the arena of learning, really, if we look at it as a life process as opposed to something that's constricted or specific to something that happens between the confines of four walls. So this is really the path that we've been taking for a number of years. And it's just recently that we've really come to the conclusion that integrating children into this ecosystem is such a critical part of the work. And this really comes from the notion that in our adult oriented world, in a lot of the foundation that we have solidified within us as adults, not to make that right or wrong, but just rather to have it be a part of our evolutionary consciousness. It's where we've come from. And this is what our imprint has carried across the generations, is an attachment to externalizing our worth, a real um, a real knowing in the fact that we are not enough as we are. That's what we sense we know as ourselves, rather than having this deep, rich, integrated approach of life and knowing that we are born whole onto the planet. And if we are given the space and the support to nurture that one very thing, that we don't have to spend the rest of our lives looking outside of us for the validation of who we are, what we believe. So what we're seeing happen right now, if I can speak to current circumstances, is that many have put their worth in the hands of others, whether it be the politicians, whether it be the opinions of their neighbors, their friends, or even their family. We understand that when a child is born, they are born into a specific ecosystem. They are born into the specific ecosystem of their own family. Yet that ecosystem continues to change and change. every time a new child is born into that family, or as the parents or the caregivers, whoever is in charge of that family, is moving through their own personal waves. So effectively, that child is born into a new family unit, depending on whether they're the firstborn child or middle child or last child. And this is why we see dominant traits depending on the birth order of that child. Now, understanding how unique an individual can be, even within a family system, let alone their neighborhood, let alone their community at large, let alone a larger academic or educational system, let alone the entire nation, let alone the world, the planet, we really come to understand how important it is to really nurture that intuition from the very earliest stages of our lives. And this is something that I think, and I've seen firsthand, having gone to school both in India and in Canada, having gone back to the village each and every year through my childhood, I recognize that this is something that's fundamentally missing in our Western ecosystem. It's missing in Western medicine, it's missing in Western psychology, it's missing from everything that has been born out of this Western conditioned plane. And this is something that I'm starting to speak to a little bit more and more, because it's easy for us to believe that this doesn't exist in any capacity and that we have to build new and that everything has to come from new thought form. But the realization that it already exists, maybe it's fragmented and it's scattered throughout different nations of the world. But really, the way I see this rehumanization or this re-evolution of our humanity is really just a reorganization of what is already existing, both within us and outside of us. So with that, I mean, there's so much that we can go into here. But really what it comes down to from our lens in terms of rehumanizing not only the education system, but our actual humanity and the connection of our humanity is really starting to first orient that connection back towards ourselves. And I think for most of the listeners probably here, we've gone through the navigation, or we're coming into the navigation of reorienting our knowledge, our knowing towards ourselves. And this is not meant to be shared in a very glorified of self type way. It's really to share the understanding that without a core understanding, a fundamental understanding of who we are, it is very difficult to understand anything outside of us. Whether that's the natural environment, physically speaking, whether that's another individual, whether that's our children, or any other species on the planet. And for me, that's really the answer as to how we've landed in the types of relationships and the type of chaos that we find ourselves in today, primarily rooted in the parent-child relationship. So when we look first at that parent-child relationship, if we all go back and feel into how was it that that relationship had me feel in my earliest years? And when most of us contemplate that, there may be feelings of, I'm not sure that I was heard. I'm not sure that I was seen. I'm not sure that I felt to be enough for whichever way I presented myself, in my emotions, in my gregarious nature, in my curiosity, whatever that may have looked like for you. I may have felt unsupported, that I had two working parents and I never knew who I would get at the end of the night. We never had one parent who was consistently there for us. And for most of us, we recognize that the knowing of self was taken away very early on. The orientation, the projection, the trajectory was all outwardly focused. And this not only started in our households by being compared to our siblings, by being compared to what the neighbor was doing, by having to wear the fancy clothes when you're going out for an outing, whatever number of experiences you had around that, you may recognize that that was further reinforced in your education ecosystem. So immediately you may have entered preschool or kindergarten and you were beginning to raise your hands just as other children raise their hands to tell the teacher that you were in attendance to listen to them, that you were there and going to comply to the systems around you. Yes, we need order. Yes, we need some semblance of structure and framework to feel safe. That's a natural requirement that we all have as humans, especially diving into this lower chakra system, which we've all been birthed out of, is really that notion of survival. And then beyond that, as we evolve into safe emotional connection, we recognize that there's so much opportunity for real inquiry, for real contemplation, for real pausing in between all the conversation and looking outwards within an individual, or sorry, within a collective space. So this is what I'm really being called to encourage and bring more voice to, is how we can practice becoming an individual within the collective at a very early stage. Because we know that when we don't feel fundamentally connected to ourselves and our own true nature, when that's revoked of us because we're crying in the crib and screaming out and looking for attention, yet our parents have been told to sleep train us, to revoke us of the food, the nourishment, the comfort that we need, that we are automatically moving into a rhythm that disconnects us with this innate power. And you were speaking so beautifully to the power, right? Before, if I got that right, or at least I felt the energy of it. But right away, we are cutting ourselves off of this innate power and this wisdom that we know ourselves to have. Furthermore, we may want to express our creativity in the household in a specific way, or in the school environment. And then we're told that, no, this is the template and this is the framework and this is how you do it. Moving from subject block to subject block to arena. Really, we're having to default to our mind and the conditioning that's already been implanted in us from a very early age, or perhaps, if you believe so, previous lifetimes, and lean specifically on that to meet ourselves in safe moments of referencing others in connection. So this by default becomes our framework from a very early age. So it's hard for me to understand that at this point, for example, amidst the elections, amidst all this chaos of the pandemic, that we wouldn't be comparing, that we wouldn't be patronizing one another for the fact that we are different. Because from our very early stages and ages, we've been called and asked to do this, to survive within our households and to survive effectively within the education system. We all can probably infer what would happen if we didn't comply within the education system. We would be punished, we would be sent to a corner, we would be disciplined in the principal's office. And that, to us as children who are so dependent on the connection, on the nurturing in relationship, knowing that that's an innate part of us, we will naturally feel that our survival, everything that we need to feel safe and grounded in this moment, is being stripped of us, is being revoked of us. So I ask you this as we move forward in this continual contemplation and our conversation today, is going back to the individual and the responsibility that we have as individuals, whether we're parents or not, whether we're educators or not. My question for you is, how can we begin to take more individual responsibility for what we are emitting out into the world, based on the conditioning and the living philosophy that resides in our cellular imprint, that resides in our cellular memory, and continues to emit a very specific frequency out in the world. For you, living behind closed doors, again, whether you're living with anybody or not, I ask you, are you living in alignment with your values? And what are those fundamental values? So often the lines are blurred between what I value and my partner values, or what I value and the society values, what I should be doing right now to fit in, to belong, because again, our early survival was dependent on that. But now your survival is not dependent on it. So I do ask, in your cup of tea tonight with your journal, explore that. Stare into that cup of tea. Observe yourself under a tree and just ask yourself, what is it that I truly value? Is it authenticity, as the gentleman we're speaking to? Is it my integrity? Is it joy? Is it freedom? Is it aliveness? Is it working with my hands and creating through this intuitive function of my hands? Is it spending time with nature? What is it that you truly value? And from that place, the amount of joy, the amount of freedom, the amount of synchronicity we build with our outer environment in relationship is really something that few of us understand. I am just coming to understand this as I really changed the landscape within me over the last 7 years. I'm really starting to understand how different our human experience is through that lens of integrity, of authenticity, of personal responsibility. So with that, I invite you and encourage you to ask yourself, where am I not in alignment with my values through this time? And what type of reality, what type of experience, what type of living foundation is it creating for me as I walk forward into more and more of the unknown, which many of us are being challenged with and around? Is, am I okay? Knowing who I am at my center. Yes, let your intuition guide you back to that center as much as you can. If you feel that, again, the lines are too blurred and you're too much in the fog, which is absolutely no fault of your own, get the support. Ask people to come in, to hold you, to receive you, to support you in this inquiry. Because what we know is that everything that we learn on this planet is in relationship to one another, in relationship to ourselves, in relationship to nature, in relationship to the species around us that coexist in this ecosystem with us. And imagine the place from which we create a completely new generation moving forward. If we are willing to excavate at the root, imagine what possibilities will come alive for future generations. And our work is not to create new forms and structures for this new generation from my lens. Our work is really to excavate and clear the path for them moving forward, so they then can create new. They are without the energy of this heaviness and this notion of doing and hustling and having to conceptualize. They are already without that at the ages of 3 and 5 and 7, before they come into this analytical faculty. They are without all that. So our work is really to pull the reins back on our conditioning, not create beliefs and meaning for them, and simply be in contemplation, in observation with them. Hold space, pause, learn how to do that for ourselves. So then from that place, children have the ability to rise and really shine out in the light and the wisdom that is already there within them. There is really little to do. There is little for them to construct and build for the future. It'll simply come from the energy that they're in. They won't even need to figure out the why or the how. They'll just know it deep in their bones, given the space to do so. So thank you for giving me the space to come together in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was so powerful. I mean, everything you said. You pointed to so many things that are so deep, intrinsic truths about just how we approach. In the West, I'm speaking from the West. There's things we don't even know that we're missing. We're missing, and I feel like, I guess a couple questions come to mind just from your beautiful share. Well, first off, this I guess a two-part question. First off, like, how did you come to find? You spoke about responsibility. How did you come to find that space in yourself to be willing to not only take responsibility, but to take it to the next level, where where you see your responsibility, that you have a choice in that? But how have you come to that? And the second part of the question is, how do we, as a society, collective, how do individuals that maybe don't even realize that they're not taking responsibility, they don't know their values, like where does one begin?
Yeah, great question. So for me, it was a really gradual process. Through my childhood, my mother was very deeply immersed in the work, as we call it, up until now. I think in the future it may be called play and joy and exploration and curiosity. But for now, we identify with the unraveling of the inauthentic self as work. We don't call it that in our Raising Humanities space, but we call it that sometimes. Okay, so I get that construct. So with regards to that, she was coming into the work quite early on through Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer, et cetera, et cetera. And what I really recognized in my childhood was there was this energy of, yes, responsiveness, yes, perception, and there was an energy of gentleness in all of that. It was really coming from a place of acceptance and forgiveness for who we've been and who we are today. And that being married with a lot of our ancient teachings that had come through our Hindu culture. Not that I'm overly identified with that, but I have learned a lot that have come through those principles. I started to understand as I grew into adulthood how tethered I was to the external system. Because as much as I could have that at home, by 6 or 7, I was already day to day in the externalization of my power and living those systems through and through. So whether it was the education, the competitive sports, I was doing it all. And I think I was still living quite a bit in my heart, probably until university. And then I lost my scholarship because I was partying and I was exploring in different ways and just had to do that little bit of the human hooks, right, of the exploration. And then when I got into the corporate world, it really hit me. I said, I've landed on this treadmill as a result of many, many choices that I've made from my childhood. And here I am, and my body's shutting down. And I'm dealing with all sorts of dysfunction. And all I can do is stay on the treadmill because it would be too scary for me to step off at this point. My entire life has led me to this moment of glory. I'm climbing the ladder and I've got it all based on the external optics. And what I recognized through that was that after 7 years of being in that, was that it was going to be a big no to at least the corporate system. That was the piece that I could take out of my life to gain some sovereignty back in my life. So what that meant for me was I went into solar entrepreneurship. But again, I was following the family model and the family business. And although I was enjoying it and deeply and richly connected to a lot of humans in the world of real estate, I did again recognize that fatigue building within me. So I'd say that's probably the greatest marker of dysfunction or misalignment with our own values, is really this exhaustion that we feel in life. And what we do by default is perhaps we resort to numbing agents. Yes, it may be the alcohol, the drugs, the food, whatever that may look like, but it may also be things like work, as it was for me, which we put on a pedestal and we idealize and say, oh, this is great, look at her. She's so successful, she's doing it all, she's upholding her family name, which we do in our culture as well. But all of that even more clearly showed me how deeply rooted I was in the construct of not enoughness and externalizing my power until the point that my children arrived. And that was the final wake-up call. It wasn't with the first child, unfortunately, but it was with the second, when I learned that he being born with club feet and us being in the hospital week after week, that this was really a choice point for me. I could either continue to see the spirit numb in my children, which I was starting to see at the ages of 2 and 6 months, or I could really make a life shift for myself. And that's when I had to get really real about the discomfort that I was running away from, all the patterns that I was deeply engaged with for the sake of my identification with the external world. And that's when I went back home and raided my mom's book collection. And I started secretly going online and, working every course across the planet and understanding what I could take from that. And with that eventually came a gradual surrender until the point that I got lost on a mountain. And that was the real letting go that had me ask, what would you have me do? And that's really when we came into this work in supporting parents and recognizing that it is virtually impossible for us to raise children when we haven't yet come to know ourselves.
That's so powerful. I mean everything you just spoke. It makes me. There's a few things you said that really stood out, but I'm curious. The whole process of us discovering our own, like, oh, just speaking for myself, finding my authentic self. You know what that is like. That feels like such a woo woo concept until I did discover my authentic self, and it's like hearing someone who has not distinguished that from themselves. It's like it's just a concept. It's an abstract idea, and but what you were saying is like I feel discovering who I'm not, discovering my inauthentic self, and how I've identified with the external world. I've identified with my thoughts, my feelings, the circumstances that are happening to life is happening to me as opposed to me happening to life. And what was like like I guess my question is like what how do we chip away or invite people, or how do we distinguish or allow people to distinguish their inauthentic selves so they can actually discover their authentic selves?
Yeah, so exhaustion and numbing agents being the first one, however it is that we may be numbing. So getting really clear with that, and creating space in your life. I think that's always where it begins. We talk about the pause and process and play model at Raising Humanity here, and it's really, really important to create spaces for that contemplation to take place. Because as long as, I mean, you can imagine yourself driving along the street. If you're just looking at the shop windows from your car, you will likely miss 99% of 100% of those things in the shop window. Yet, if you're walking and you've got space and you've got time, you may notice not only the things in the shop window, you may notice the quality of the air. You may notice the sound of the birds. You may notice the state of the trees. You may notice the beautiful imperfections in the sidewalk. So that contemplation that happens in the pauses is what we really need to begin with. And sometimes that happens as we surround ourselves with new people, which can feel like a really, really big step out. But as we start to spend time with ourselves in the discomfort of that, whether it's, just finding a tree in nature and enjoying the sun under that, whether it's really in the non-doing that I find that the guidance starts to come alive. So it's not inherent to me anymore to guide people to do more and more and more to figure themselves out. It's actually the opposite, to say, hey, at this point in my schedule, I'm going to have carte blanche to do whatever it is that my heart is called to do in that moment. And if my emotions arise, I start feeling them. If I'm called to go for a run, I do that. Whatever it may be, called to speak to a friend. And that way we know in that moment that whatever the message is that's meant to come through to us will arise because it's given space. It's been given space. So really just blocking that time out of your calendar, first and foremost. And I think during this time of the pandemic, there's never been a better time to begin this inner contemplation of who is it that I really am? What would I have me do if I was free in these moments? What do I enjoy? What brings life to me? So that's where I would recommend beginning based on my own personal experiences.
I feel that very much so. And I really honor, or play or experimentation, whatever words work. It doesn't matter to me. But that intention of clearing the way for children is something that I feel very deeply connected to. And it's something we've talked about here on the stage before several times. The way I put it, and I wonder if this resonates with you, is I grew up being told what the world was, not being invited to discover what it is for myself. And that fundamental intention that exists in our evolutionary history of just telling others what we think the world is instead of letting them discover it really, I mean, I don't really consider anything sin, but I feel like
Mm.
original sin might be a great word for that. It might be a great phrase for that. And it just the question that's coming is what what pushback have you been getting from parents on this? Like where's the resistance, and what is a path that you see through that
Thank
with them?
you. That's a big, brave, bold question in our world of modern day parenting, because we understand that parenting 1 to 5 generations ago and even today is steeped in control. We have not learned how to be with the unknown, even through our pregnancies. We're running into ultrasounds every month or every other month. We're needing to find out, needing to do, needing to be a part of all these circles so we understand exactly what the mystery of that experience may be like. Yet the mystery in itself is where the gifts are born. That's where we unveil the real essence of what we're here to experience as humans. So without becoming too metaphorical or out there, I'd love to bring it back to the fact that with parents, because we have so many systems and formulas and constructs that support them in controlling, they don't have very much reason for that for themselves to pull out of the control. It's a very readily available system. From this is how you sleep train, this is how you pump formula into your out of your body and into the child. This is how you educate them prematurely to prepare them for preschool. And I'm at at full awareness of those parents. I shouldn't say those parents, I was very much one of them, but what would motivate me to have my child land in a competitive environment? Because that's exactly what I had my own children do prior to even entering the education system, prior to even entering kindergarten. They were already in a competitively based school because that's where I was. That's where I was in my psyche and my conditioning, so I couldn't help but put that on them. So this is probably the greatest barrier and pushback that we have from parents, is they don't understand why there would be even a reason for us to take a different approach than what we've taken, at least in this very generation. Because most of us know that our parents were probably in some ways more easygoing and more up for surrender than we are in this generation. Even the world of spirituality and personal growth now is so mired in control. So this notion of letting go is a very foreign one. And it's scary as anything to have the one child that you've spent 9 months birthing to now not be within your control. That is absolutely the scariest thing. And what I really, really would encourage parents, anybody who's listening, to understand is, yes, we were once there and we're returning to where we've come from, which is the energy of trust. Because without that child feeling into the fact that you trust the process, you trust your unlearning process alongside their learning process, they will never learn how it is that they can come to trust themselves in their decisions, in who they are and what they value. And as a result, we have millennials and we have people graduating from university who really don't know where to go. So by default, they end up traveling the world because um, they've been so tied to their parents' way of being, who their parents say they need to be, that they just need to release. They just need to get out. They just need to party. They just need to do something different to give them an excuse to be something different. But effectively, they don't know what they want. That's what our world is at right now at 20, 30, 40, 50. Most people, if you ask them, they don't know what they want. They're generally looking outside of them to determine that. So I hope that answered the question. I may have missed a little bit on the second part.
It did very much so. It's that, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, which is uh, recognizing the fatigue, recognizing the unhappiness, recognizing the misery, and being totally honest with oneself. Like based on what you just said right there, the question I would pose to parents, probably not with these exact words, it would vary based on the parent, but something to the effect of, if you're really being honest with yourself,
Mm.
how much joy is really present in your life on a moment-to-moment basis? And if the answer is little or none, then what is stopping you from jumping into the things that bring you joy?
Mm. Yeah, and joy is such an abstract concept for us because we have no familiarity with it anymore. Joy right now for most of us is created through through creating the conditions. Well, if
Hmm.
I'm there for the exact time of sunset, I'll be happy. If I'm there at my favorite restaurant having my favorite meal, I will be happy. If I achieve so and so and my child behaves in a certain way, I will be very happy. So our joy is already built out as being a very conditional framework. Most of us don't remember what it's like to have access to joy in a very unencumbered state, which is where it naturally arises. So I love this question. And what's become really real for us is most parents can't even connect to the energies of joy and freedom and allowance and forgiveness and acceptance, all that which is buried deeply within them and so present in their children, but they continue to push away because it's become so unfamiliar and therefore terrifying for them to even entertain. So my question would sort of be maybe quite openly, and I perhaps have never asked this before, but would you want your child to end up like you?
Mm. Wow.
That's a really difficult question, and I am wholeheartedly asking myself that question first. So it
Mm.
is absolutely not pointed in any direction except here first. But I do ask is
Hmm.
the question is what parts of my life, as you've already mentioned in a different way, am I clearly not happy with? And do I want the children to end up in that same sort of way? And if
Mm.
I'm thrilled about my life, totally brutally honest about that in that contemplation, hells yeah, let's continue on this trajectory.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
we
got
really
children.
appreciated it. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us and sharing. We're going to check back with you in a moment, but I just really honor you and your sharing, your insight, your wisdom. It's so profound. Everything you spoke about is it's just so powerful. So just thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you for creating this space. I'm really honored to be here.
Thank you, Ashley. And thank you all for tuning in with us. This space, I want to take a moment real quick to just invite you. I want you to share your gifts, share your unique genius with us. That's what this space is for. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you've experienced in your life that we all can learn from, that we all can learn and discover our true selves more. In this experience of this shared world, we all have something that enriches each of us. And I want to hold this space so I can share the gifts that you have, so I can receive your gifts, but also share them because you have something so powerful, and that's part of what our mission is bringing you and me and communities together in joyous celebration, unifying humanity in our diversity to create a better world for us all. And that's what this stage is about. All right, now I'd like to welcome our second guest. We have Henry. How you doing, Henry?
What's up, Abram? I'm doing just the best over here.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for joining us, man. I'm really excited to have you.
Yeah, good to be here. What a great stage.
Thank you, man. I'm just gonna let you have at it now. Let's have at it. The stage is yours, Henry.
All right. Well, thanks much, Abram. You know, when Abram and I first connected, I could just the creativity was just spilling out of him, which is so awesome. And myself, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, but you know, I've traditionally, for most of my life, been living in the left side of my brain, the logical, the reason and math and science sort of stuff. But I've really grown into more of that spirituality, that right brain, creativity, and the feeling, the more feeling aspect than the receiving and analyzing part. Really from yang to yin, if you want to put it that way. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today, which is, well, really two things, but the main framework is intuition. That's the main point I want to bring apart. And the other part is compassion, of course, which, picking up from what everyone else has said already in this awesome one-day stage event. But intuition. So recently I made a pretty big life decision, and I'd love to take you along this story where 2 months ago, I'm just looking at my calendar. Yeah, about 2 months ago, I moved across the country to a place where I knew nobody at all. You might be able to tell with some of my background stuff. I'm living in Wyoming right now. It's my new home, Cody, Wyoming. And a lot of people ask me, why Wyoming? And that's both from where I used to live, which I'll talk about, where my hometown, and here in Wyoming. People, why'd you come here? And it all goes back to intuition. So let me backtrack to what started me on this path and this track to move out here. So I grew up in the Chicago area, great place. People always ask me when I was looking to move, oh, you think you're ever going to move back to Chicago? I said, well, Chicago's a great city, one of the best, especially in the summertime. It's hard to beat. But problem is, and a lot of people don't recognize this, or maybe they're not aware, it's actually located in the state of Illinois. And it's not a place where I want to be personally. So that's my answer to that. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So I grew up in Chicago. I went to college up in upstate New York. And after college, this is in 2017, I moved to Boston. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before. But at the time, I was dating a girl. She lived in Boston. She was going to school still at the time. And so that's what drew me there. And there was other reasons. I had a corporate job that I lined up. I had my other contacts, but we all know that's the underlying reason. Before I was able to move there, we broke up. Shocker. I know, we were high school sweethearts, and we were pretty much dating all through college. But I was like, hey, I've got all this other stuff. Boston's a cool city. Well, let's see how it works. Let's see how it goes. I moved there. I started my corporate job, and I started feeling pretty lost. From what we've already talked about here on this session is what's really in my heart. What do I really want to my legacy to be? How can I really impact the world? And who is the single guy? That's me, right? I've been in this relationship for so long. I'm like, man, what's it like to just live for myself and not have to compromise if I don't want to on certain things. So anyway, started the corporate world, and people started to ask me, a few months in, oh, how's the job going, right? And I said, well, I don't know. It was my first job, right? So I said, I'm not sure what I don't like about this job versus what I don't like about jobs, period, right? It's hard to suss those two out. And so the only thing that I thought to do was to go inward. And the way that started was I realized, man, I've got actual money coming in, right? Like this is a pretty well-paid corporate job. It was a large consulting firm, huge global company called Accenture. You may have heard of them, but if not, yeah, just a massive, massive, huge company. And I was like, man, I've got money coming in. I've got rent to pay and expenses. I got to figure out this whole finance thing. I started reading some finance books. I had never really been a big reader. And that was, a story and identity that I had from the school system, where I just basically would find the summaries of all the English books I needed to read, and it worked. So I didn't feel the need to read, but I really felt this grasp on this nonfiction personal development, again, left brain kind of stuff, right? So got into the financial books, and it was really eye-opening. It led to some of the more classic personal development books: Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, of course, financial related, but then there's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then even The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And so it was that spark that led to reading more and more. And just while I'm at this part of the story, I fell into this. It's called the FIRE movement: Financial Independent, Retire Early. And it's a little extreme. These folks tend to be more along the lines of save 80% of your income, live like on a shoestring at all times, and retire at 35, whatever. I thought it was cool at the time, but and I borrowed some ideas, but since then I've passed by. Anyway, it got me in the mindset of, well, I pretty much have been looking to leave Boston ever since I got there, right? I mean, with the girlfriend not being there, I realized that, this really wasn't my decision when it boiled down to it. And so I'm like, well, I could always look at cost of living and taxes. So I started looking at that, and there's, of course, in the US, a list of about 7 or 8 states, I don't know the number, but 7 or 8 states that have no income tax. New Hampshire, Florida, Nevada, Texas, there's a couple more, and of course Wyoming. And what's weird is when I saw that list, Wyoming was like highlighted. It was like 3D popping out at me, and I was so early on in my journey that I didn't quite have intuition on board. Or, well, it was there. It's always been there, but I was not used to listening to it. It was a strange thing to do for me at the time. So I was like, why the hell would I move to Wyoming? What's there, So I forgot about it. Continued my personal development. Kept reading. I stayed in the corporate world for now, and it led me to all these books and YouTube videos. They led me to the sales course that I took, which blew the lid off my head of just realizing what it's like. It was a sales course, okay? So it was how do you sell by serving? How do you find out what the person's deep desires are, what they need, and give it to them? Or if that's not part of your service, if it doesn't connect, referring them to someone who would do that. And so I really was like, man, this stuff is so powerful. I really dove in deep. I took another sales course, which was actually copywriting course. And copywriting is just selling in the print medium. Writing ads, writing scripts, writing emails, text messages, any sort of written language, persuasive writing, you could call it. And that's when I really fell in love with the strategy behind it, just like the finesse that you need to put the right words in the right order. I was like, man, this is really something I could replace my job with. And because I skipped the part. One of the personal development books I read was the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and that it got me in my mind of like, okay, if I really want to build wealth and do this, live the life I want, it's time to find a side hustle. And so it was in that looking for a side hustle that the sales course fell into my lap. Okay, so that's an important piece of the puzzle to include. At this point, this was about last year, August, September timeframe, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave my corporate job in May of 2020. I set that in stone. I was like, I'm going to do it. Told my manager a few months later, just so he could plan and replace me. He's just the greatest guy. I actually had a conversation with him last night just to catch up. But I was going to do it. And then, of course, I was preparing March rolled around, and yeah, I'm not sure if you were ever heard or if you were there or not, but the world turned a little bit upside down. I was faced with this dilemma of, do I stay with my plan, or do I clutch closer to the comfort of the corporate world? Okay. And I had support really on both sides. My manager was like, the option's open. I know you made this decision, but if you want to stay here, we're happy to have you. And I was like, I could do that, but what I decided to do was stick with my choice. There's always going to be an excuse to not follow your dreams, to not follow what feels right, that intuition. And no matter how big or small it might seem, and this one seemed pretty big, there's always going to be one. So I wasn't going to let this be my excuse. I left the corporate job in May 2020, just like I planned, started my own business. And at that point, it was like the last string tying me to Boston. That was it. I had some friends there still, of course, but the job, having to report somewhere day to day, that was a big one. And so I was like, well, where do I go? And all throughout this springtime, before and after leaving the corporate job, I kept getting these signals. Wyoming. As in, I would pick it up in conversation somewhere. I was dating this girl at the time, and she goes, the one place I really want to travel to in the whole world, could be anywhere. I was like, no, I have no idea. She said Yellowstone. So that's another sign. I really couldn't ignore it anymore, really. So I bought a car. I didn't own a car at the time. I was biking or public transportation in Boston. Bought the car, packed it up, drove out here to Wyoming, and here I am. So that's really what I've learned from just following my intuition. And no matter what anyone else says, Wyoming, what the heck? And what's the deal with that? And there's logic behind it that I could give. I love nature. I really like the big open sky, like the night sky here. If you've ever been out here, it's just it's unforgettable. Things like that, and just a slower pace of life. But I can get those in a lot of different areas. It's just the gut, the heart said Wyoming, so I said, okay, let's make this happen. And really, the way that to bring it back to the theme here is by living this dream and following my heart. It's been a way to inspire others. I just spoke at a summit the other week called the Your Big Dreams Realized Summit. And I shared the same story where a lot of people are like, man, that is so great. And I just helping people by being my own authentic self and living more into that. It's so special. So special. I mean, really just every day, there's only one small goal, and that's just to be my best that day, to show up best for my clients, my copywriting clients, for my teammates. And that's all I can really do. It's all of us can really do. And that's enough. It ripples out and it makes that impact. And I'm doing it again right here. Hopefully, if this message lands with you, that's excellent. And that is so great. I know I'm coming up on time here. I had a lot more that I wanted to share, but my blabbermouth got in the way. And I made this story longer than intended, but hey, I just hope this message lands. And just my suggestion to anyone in the audience is, if you've got some feeling that it doesn't make sense, it's not logical, but it's there and it's strong, just follow it. See what happens, right? I can move back to Boston tomorrow. It's no big deal, but I don't think I will, because that intuition ended up being right. And if you follow yours, maybe you'll find out the same.
Thank you, Henry, for sharing that story of following your intuition. I think that's powerful, and I'm curious, just seeing who you were a year ago and who you are today, your experience of yourself. Like who was the Henry that was in Boston with that corporate job that you felt lost versus following your intuition? I assume, I'm not sure if you're making as much as you were as a corporate job, but are you like, how do you experience, like, in your own fulfillment, but also in your own experience of yourself? Like, what is the difference that you've experienced just from following your intuition this far?
Right. Yeah. Great question, Abram. And it's like one of my mentors says is, it's not how much money you make, it's how you make the money. Right. And that's really the biggest difference. You know, I was working with India mostly. You know, I had a whole team of engineers in India. I had to jump on midnight calls sometimes with China. You know, it was the global world that I was working in. And now it's like, you know, after this event, I'm gonna go take a walk outside. You know, I went to the grocery store in the middle of the day today, but I still got my work done. And, you know, the money, you know, there's definitely potential to make as much and more than I was. You know, I made a $3,000 sale this morning, so that's always a good feeling. And it was my own, right? I did the work required. It wasn't just like, here you go, hey, you did your thing. It's another 2 weeks. Here's your paycheck. And I'm getting off track here, but man, is there a difference from a year ago? And I know Abram talked at the beginning about being vulnerable, and, you know, be careful what you wish for, because a year ago today, I'm so glad that this came up, is I stopped masturbating. So I'm a year sober, you could say, from that lustful part of me. You know, it was No Nut November, as you might know, is like the popular thing. So I started it last year, and it just kept rolling. It kept going, and that's just having a lot of compassion for myself throughout that whole process. And, like, you know, we're in this society. I'm going a little bit off the rails, so stop me if you need to. But
please.
Yeah, we're in this world where you're getting so many mixed messages that it's hard to know what's real and what's true unless you go in and listen to that intuition, bringing it back. So, you know, there's the one side that's like, no, don't objectify women, it's wrong, which is of course true. But then at the same time, objectifying women is everywhere in our commercials, in our TV. It's like you've got both these messages, and so it brings guilt within, and, you know, pornography is involved for sure. So yeah, I'm really just proud of myself that I've made it this far. It's day by day. You know, you put in the work. It's one more day without watching porn. It's one more day without masturbating, and you just keep stringing those along until you hit milestones, like I just did.
Thank you.
I'm excited.
Yeah, congratulations, man.
Thanks.
That's great, man. That you found that you're taking your journey, and you're expanding in your true nature and your true self.
Yes.
In beautiful Wyoming. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, it's like I'm just kind of laughing to myself a little bit too, because, you know, this show, like, we never planned anything, and yet, you know, we have this almost perfect story arc that's happening, where it's like Ashley is coming and described, you know, what she sees as a crucial issue in our world, you know, the way parents raise children, and then here you are just being a demonstration of that very thing playing out, and then, like, what you're learning from it and jumping off from it, and now what you're creating for yourself, because that happened. And, like, it's not that was bad or wrong. It's just like you are now in a unique position. You are the only person in the universe that is experiencing exactly what you're experiencing, and
Right.
you get to step off, learning from everything that your parents brought into the world, and now create something new based on all of that is completely unique and has never been seen before.
Yes, I'm so glad you tied the two guests together, because a lot of stuff, right? It's when you really think about, you know, and I had this experience of, well, what are my beliefs? What do I really care about? And stuff would come up, but I question, is that really mine? Is that really, or does that just come from my parents or my education or my friends, whatever? A lot, like 99% of the time, it was other people. My parents were very traditional. They were believed in the idea of get a college, get a corporate job, you have a great life, and I lived that beginning part, right? And I went to college for engineering of all things. It's one of the best career options, and to your point, Matthew, it's a really, really key thing to hone in on. It's there's no blame involved. There's no wrong. It's not my parents did this to me or they were wrong. It's they did what was best, what they thought was best at the time, and it's not my fault either for listening to that or internalizing it, but it is now my responsibility to do something about it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, let's bring it on that note. This is all tying together. Let's bring Ashley back in here. So speaking about intuition and responsibility, I like Matthew was saying, Henry has actualized basically what you're describing and just finding his. I feel like this is like a theme that I'm noticing in myself, but also in hearing so many guests just throughout these months. It's like I put it this way a lot recently. It's like we're kind of born in a bubble, like the way that we see the world, and that's maybe the agreements of past generations. Maybe it's the way that we see the world in these lenses that we hold. But we think the world is the bubble, and we live it. And like at some point, our bubble's gonna pop, and it's like we realize that the world that we experience, and ourselves that we experience, is not limited to this confined bubble that we thought it was. And I just want to ask, like, well, I wanted to give you a moment to speak to that. Like, I feel that this is a theme in humanity, that we have this bubble, that we live and see the world and ourselves through this bubble, and then the bubble pops, and then it's like, whoa, I'm not who I thought I was, and the world isn't what I thought. I'm so much bigger than I thought, and the world is so much bigger than I thought. And I just want to cast to you both, like, any thoughts on just connecting what was shared with in that space of discovering true self and going out in the world and moving to Wyoming and the beautiful Yellowstone.
Sure. I mean, I could feel that just really quickly, and it's like everything happens for a reason, right? As cliche as that has become, it's the bubble that you're talking about. Without that bubble, it would have been a much different path. If I hadn't started in corporate, let's say, I would have never known that doesn't connect with me, right? Well, just for argument's sake, if I went right into the entrepreneurship world, maybe in the back of my head, I'd be like, oh, I wonder if corporate would be right for me. I would have no idea. So it's not only realizing what's the right path or what feels best for us, it's also figuring out when maybe we're taking a wrong turn. And it's all about, until you experience that, you'll never know. And so so the bubble really, it's like a guardrail almost.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ashley, do you have any thoughts or inquiries about this bubble we speak of? Oh, you're on mute.
My apologies. I'm still taking in what Henry said. It's just so beautiful how that intuitive path is as powerful as it is. So I congratulate you on that courage to follow exactly that.
Thank you.
As non-linear as it is as well. Yeah. So beautiful. So speaking about the bubble, it's interesting because this has sort of been at the forefront of my experience through this pandemic as well, is that they are actually putting children into many, many, many small bubbles, whether it's in the schooling system, whether it's within their communities. Well, you can come and learn, join this community or this learning center if you stick to your bubbles. And I know it's definitely being done in the adult world as well. But it's been really interesting for the kids to sit there and scratch their head and say, but what's going to happen if I go over there? And yesterday I was at it was like a parents mom sort of marketing event, and there were 12 of us, maybe 13. And the restaurant manager was quite upset at the fact that there were more people than he expected, and rightfully so. I mean, that's their business that they put all their blood, sweat, and tears into. So we were relocated to a different restaurant, and when we got there, they were, just as strict about, hey, you guys stick to this table and you stick to this table. But what I found was naturally we were just feeling magnetized to go over to the other bubble, the other cohort, and dance in that conversation, because our natural rhythm is exploratory. Like, we can't help but gravitate energetically to where we're meant to go. So to confine ourselves to this bubble of 6 individuals is so counterintuitive to our nature. And I just find it so interesting that, the children are sitting there saying, I don't get it. Like, these are the people that I've spent my whole entire life, to the best of my knowledge, associating with. And now you're telling me I can't play with them, and I have to play on this specific end of the playground and in this way. So for me, it's really a representation of the conformity and the the isolation, the speak of isolation to the max. Like, if we're not seeing it now, then when will we see this? How much we live in the silo approach, and particularly in the West, where we have these nuclear family arrangements. It's really here, and it's unfunctional for us to continue like this. So all that to say, I think it's really a beautiful illustration of how this more global village, and not to sort of paint the metaphor on that one, but just to say that everyone's really our family in some context, and to really get that through this time, I think, is just is such a profound gift for our world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that sentiment. And that's kind of what's happening more in this, as the world becomes more interconnected. Obviously, partly from globalization, partly from technology, and and especially, and it's interesting because what's opened up with the pandemic is obviously everyone is more in their everyone's kind of in their own bubble, in their own quarantine bubble, but we're all like, everyone is like, we're connecting, bubbles are connecting, and I feel like popping simultaneously, and it's like we're our experience of our individualized, it's like the mirror that Matthew was speaking about earlier. It's like this COVID really held up a big mirror to us all, like everyone just like paused, like no matter what you're up to, pause. Like, well, wait, I don't want to pause. Yeah, I got to pause. And it's like everybody was just in that boat, and it's like, and including myself, it's like, how did I get here? How did we get here? Who am I? Who are we? And like, where have we been headed? And like, what is this world that, how did we get to this point? And it's like, I see this collective, it's this collective bubble popping of us experiencing ourselves. And, I think it's beautiful what's opening up the opportunities for people to actually not play the old games of just following what our parents thought was what we're told through just a generational conversation. This is the way it has to be, and this is the way it's always going to be. And now it's like, well, maybe that's not working anymore. Like, at least on a mass scale, maybe it's not just a one size fits all. Maybe there's something each of us have that can contribute to a new conversation. And like Ashley was saying, it's like it's rearranging what's already here within us, but also without in the world. It's like there's wisdom and insight in every culture, every community, every individual has something to teach us. And I feel like when we can incorporate and be enriched by the gifts of each individual in each community, it's like our experience of ourselves and our experience, like our ability to follow our intuition, I feel like is growing now, because people are seeing they don't have to play that old game, which is get rich, get famous, get a lot of money and toys, and then die. That's the point of life, is to get a lot of toys and to just look good and to avoid looking bad. And it's like now it's like, well, what can I contribute to this world? What beauty could I help my fellow humans experience in every space that we exist? I want to. This has been a really great conversation. I really just appreciate you both. I want to, before we close, I want to give both of you an opportunity to share anything. If there's anything you wanted to comment about each other's share, or if there's any last words or anything that's coming to your intuitively to you.
Well, I really love Ashley's message, and I'm not a parent myself yet. Yeah, my joke is, my girlfriend is from Wyoming. I just haven't met her yet. So that's coming. But it's just realizing how we affect others.
It's too good.
That's a take home for anyone who's listening this long. But really, it's like, how do we affect others? Really, how do we show up? And I think the most extreme, the most influence we really have is on our close family, spouses, parents, children, brothers, sisters. But it goes beyond that. So I'm really glad that I got to share the stage with you, Ashley.
Yeah, me too. I'm really celebrating in this moment the beauty that you're bringing forward as, somebody in a male body in this lifetime. You've also so profoundly showcased your feminine, intuitive ways that really have us connect on a human level. And I really want to acknowledge that, because that's the courage that men are being invited to in our world today. And that's the other half of the dance. I mean, me as a woman, I can show up here and do my thing. And, I think even as women, we're sort of dancing between how masculine can we be, as per the old paradigm of distorted power, and in this new era of women also making decisions and taking action. So what I'm really loving is this interconnection now that's happening between different identifications and different orientations. And for me, where that lands is really in a place of, it's like a middle path. There's a place of acceptance there that doesn't have to be so polarized, because the counterbalances equal each other out, and there's neutrality just based on our different experiences, if that's sort of landing at all. And with that comes a real sense of safety for me, and I think a lot of others who may experience all of this uniqueness in one container. So I thank you for holding that counterbalance. I guess that's all to say, that I so much appreciate the way that you are choosing to show up. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Beautifully said.
I'd like to jump in. Actually, thank you. I love both of you, and I really appreciate both of you being on here. And you just so eloquently put exactly into words how I've been feeling about Henry. I'd just like to say, thank you for actually standing up as a being in a woman's body in its incarnation and sharing your voice. That is something that has not happened a lot up until now. And as a guy, witness to women rising up and finding the courage to share their intuitive truths has been awe-inspiring. And I just really want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I hear some beautiful music in the back to echo those sentiments. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a real gift and honor to land in the West as a result of the decision my parents made to be here, and have a mother who chose to dive into her unlearning while we were children and help pave a path towards something that would allow us to be free in our voice, our expression, our love for the world as it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your voice and your story. It really, for me, it brings us, it's one thing I've observed in just this having this space and having so many guests. It's just like our stories are really what connect us. Our expression of our experience. You know, how we can see ourselves in each other, and like Matthew was saying, it's holding up that mirror. You know, it's just like we all have our experience. We all have our trials and fears and things we face, and that barriers between ourselves and our expression of our true selves. And I think it's it's so powerful when we can hold up stories like and both of you sharing. It's just because we all are not only in this together, but we all have so much power. And when we can recognize our just how every moment and every choice we make, how much impact, whether we can see it and recognize it or not, everything we do or don't do has a ripple effect. It impacts the entire universe. Every word we make, kept or broken, every smile or frown, every handshake or fist we extend, it shapes our experience of our reality. And you two are just an example of, you know, beautiful humanity standing in intuition and in beauty, you know, but taking responsibility for your peace and for, you know, just showing up, like truly showing up. And I really appreciate and I honor, and I just honor you both, and really just thank you for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Sharing.
What a blessing.
Oh, thank you both so much. And thank you all for tuning in with us at home. This has been a wonderful conversation. You know, this is, again, I want to take the opportunity to invite you to share with us. Share your story with us on this stage. This is a space for you. This is a space for all of us to share the gifts, the insights, the wisdom, the things that we've faced in our lives that connect us, that bring us together, that just the experience of ourselves is so much bigger than who we think we might be. You know, it's like, we're like, what if our authentic selves is bigger than we imagine? What if who we are in this world and who we can be is so much bigger than what the constraints of what our mind tells us we can or can't do? You know, focusing on what we can't do, my experiences leaves me in. When I focus on the lack, it's what I get is lack. But when I focus on the beauty, this is what comes out of it. Is there's just beautiful stories and beautiful people sharing themselves in ways that connect us all. And I just want to just thank you all for being here. And this is all part of our one-day vision, which is humanity rising in a connected world with each person's unique contributions being valued and magnified through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. That's why we're here, and that's what we say, and that's what we're sticking to. So I just want to thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you, Ashley and Henry, for being with us. And for all of you at home, be safe, be well. And as always, one day is today. Take care, everybody.